Hi, everyone. This is Carol Mahoney of Unbound Growth, a scientific sales development firm. And I just came off of a LiveSalesLab where I was joined by Tracy DeCicco, who has a sales consulting firm that helps tech companies access the C-level. And I was really excited to have her on today because our topic today was researching and preparing for meetings. And so, Tracy, you're in a unique position to tell us what is the biggest complaint that executives have when it comes to sales meetings.
Thank you, Carol. It's great being on your LiveSalesLab today. And of course, in the last month or so, I shared with you an article from Harvard about the disconsonance that executives feel after meeting with salespeople, where the salespeople felt they did a very good job, but the executives feel that they were quite ill prepared. So I think one of them is that I get feedback from clients that, whether it's here through some colleagues, that you need to be able to prepare well for the meeting with a customer. Their time is precious. They're very busy people, and you need to be able to prepare for that meeting with that customer. Prepare an adequate agenda, vet the agenda ahead of time, and that kind of thing.
So walking into the meeting and asking an executive what it is that keeps them up at night is not a good idea.
Not a good idea at all. It's a guaranteed way to get thrown out of the meeting in every single case.
Yeah, I feel like that phrase of what keeps you up at night should be banned from all sales conversations, including just checking in and following up and getting a status update. Like those should all be banned from sales language.
Or all human language.
And human, yeah, exactly. And if sales is to sell is to be human. So there we go. So getting into the research part of things, so if preparing for these meetings is so important, what are some of the best ways to do that? Like, what are some of the ways they should be doing that?
To know their financial information if they're a publicly available firm. If it's a retailer, you need to shop their stores. If it's another industry, if it's a bank, you need to shop their bank. You need to know who they are. You need to research the people because these are humans. So you need to look at their LinkedIn profile. You need to do thorough research on their strategy through any sort of public documentation, because you need to assimilate what you think could be some possible pain points for this client that you potentially could solve.
And no matter what it is that you think, because my favorite phrase is it's not about what you think, how do you then go about vetting that with the various people that are going to be involved?
Have a champion or a sponsor that's relatively high up in an organization, and maybe my meeting is with someone that's even more senior to them. I might work through that meeting champion or that sponsor to get their feedback on if I'm on track with the research I've done or the agenda that I pulled together, or any sort of feedback or edits they might have to that agenda. So I'll probably get feedback. Typically, I'll get feedback through a sponsor that I have at the firm, who's typically fairly highly placed.
Right.
Because I want to know that I've got into that agenda where the even more senior folks I'm meeting with have seen the agenda. Everyone, the ultimate meeting contact, let's say it's a meeting with the CEO, they need to have seen that agenda as well. And I need to have gotten feedback through my sponsor about any edits to that agenda.
Yeah,
so because prepared.
Like we said at the very beginning, this is their time, this is their agenda. And as the salesperson, building that consensus isn't going to happen by just walking into that meeting ill-prepared. And there's a lot of steps that are going to be involved, especially, like you've said, if you're selling to C-level, eventually to C-level, as a lot of companies, especially tech companies, are going after target accounts these days. So one of the things that was actually really interesting is we talked on the Sales Lab about, and we've all had this happen. Everyone in the lab has had this happen where you do your research, you put together an agenda with them, they vet that agenda, they give you edits and suggestions, and you're filling in the gaps, and you walk into the meeting and they say, yep, we don't want to talk about anything that's on the agenda, we want to talk about this. Now what do you do? And one of the interesting things was the reaction that one of the people described on the lab was suddenly getting this deer in the headlights internal conversation going on and trying to sort of scramble as to, okay, what's going on here? Meanwhile, there's this whole conversation that was going on around and not really being able to cue into that. So, and actually one of the things that I shared with them is that the challenge there is maintaining that emotional control to be able to ask some questions, like you had shared a couple, that what happens when that pivot happens?
So personally, I try to prepare for all sorts of pivots that I might expect. So you can almost anticipate a pivot. You might even talk with your meeting sponsor about any sort of pivots that may come up. but you want to go into that meeting pretty much feeling assured there will be a pivot or two, guaranteed. And that right there can deflate some anxiety, right? If you go into a meeting knowing that there will be some sort of a pivot, it deflates some of that anxiety. So you need to prepare around different scenarios, and you need to go into that meeting expecting that there will be some sort of a pivot, and guarantee you there will probably be some pivot, and you need to be prepared to address that pivot. Now, you don't know everything. So if something comes up in that meeting that you truly cannot address, then you're honest with the customer and you tell them you've noted it and we'll be able to get back to them.
Yeah.
And adjunct to the earlier part about the prep, a big thing about what I think people need to consider going into any of these meetings is you ultimately, at the end of the day, need to be a thought leader. You need to bring forward meaningful, valuable information to your customer. So you can't just research financials and strategy. You also need to bring forth a point of view on the industry and a point of view to your customer. I wanted to share that as well.
And I look at it this way is that if the more that a salesperson can ingrain themselves and embed themselves in the world of the person that they're talking to create that kind of empathy that they can understand what it actually might be like, that's the gold of all of this yes, everything that you plan for, it's probably going to pivot and change, because guess what? Human beings are these dynamic things that they like to change at the last second, and you're not going to even see it coming sometimes.
Exactly.
And so even the best laid plans are there, but without a plan, you can't have any kind of an idea of the context of what their goals might be, whether their goals are going to align with something that you can help with or that to your own, and then understanding their world so that you can add that value, so that you come with that outside perspective. You've done all of this research that gives you the knowledge, you've put it into context, you've vetted it with them. And as executives, as having worked with them and been one, you get sometimes so wrapped up in what's going on inside of your company. All right, so to wrap it up, so next week, actually, we're going to be talking about building consensus, because it segues really well into what we talked about today. And talking about how do we actually execute on that research that we've gotten? How do we actually execute on setting up those agendas and getting the agendas vetted with each individual person? So stay tuned for next week's Sales Lab. The link will be below, noon Eastern time. With the link below, there'll also be a link below to Tracy and to her company. So check that out. And thank you so much for joining us today, Tracy.
Thank you, Carol.